Good morning. Good morning. I wasn't going to do one today, but I was kind of floating around in my head, trying to think if I was going to do one, what would I do? And then I looked at my diary, which is basically my Facebook, which is last year's diary post, last year's videos, and then I always am, was absolutely blown away by the fact that the theme of those videos was exactly what I was going to talk about if I was going to talk about something. Exactly. So and this is constant. And this is one of the many phenomena that happen consistently all the time. And I mean, there's basically only one really kind of possible explanation, is that in a heightened state of threat, my brain has adapted to utilize more of its capacity in order to somehow what I'm getting, like in combination with these tools that are a very high level, like how I use Facebook is like it's a probably 1,000-fold increase from a written diary on a shelf, and so that in combination with my kind of dormant subconscious is doing this. It has basically there's a lot of ants on this table, sorry. It has or it must have a kind of like we have everyone knows about our body clock. So we have this, what's it called? Your something rhythm, psychatic, is it something whatever that is. So the 24-hour body clock that we talk about, where you wake up, you go to the toilet, you sleep, you wake, all those things. It's not psychatic, it's something similar to that. For some reason I've developed a annualized version of that, in order to defend myself, because that is the space that this phenomenon is taking place in, and it's brought into frame if you also understand that I am from a construction background. So deadlines, target dates, and completion and things like that, these are all part of my experience of my career, which I had, which was disrupted by these individuals and this system of socialism. And basically the theme is about it more or less it's tied into the pension, and to do with the most specifically my mother's disability pension, and now her old age pension, and how that is enabling her illness, which is even weirder, because it's like it wouldn't matter whether she had an illness or not. It's enabling her destructive pattern of behavior, which is more or less what got her initiated into a system of disability. And so so what was sold as a system of care is, and we're surrounded by this because this is a very prominent argument in the current day political conversation. And unfortunately, Australians are not getting the full story of what has already been going on in these systems. And that is unacceptable. You can't, we cannot be in an argument to do with the attempt again to assess Aboriginal populations without understanding this phenomenon, which is what did I call it? I called it overlapping covert colonisation. We need a clearly displayed, historic timeline of colonisation, and that needs to be published at the highest level. And so, to begin that process, I'm going to get into some of the details of how I believe this new wave colonisation flew under the radar in some type of unspoken alliance with forces in the United Kingdom. Okay, and this is where we immediately have to understand these nations. I'm not going to draw it down because we probably don't need it. But if we conceive a possibility, and this is quite consistent across in comparison to the United States. So we have original British, which is condensed in the narrative of that, is condensed to English. So we have, even though it was British, and at that time Britain was Wales, England, and Scotland, and Northern Ireland wasn't really as much involved, but I think maybe it was a little bit, or maybe that was just the flag. Maybe the flag came later. But anyway, there's early stage British colonisation. And then really, if we get down into the commonly discussed details of how that supposedly, what the next level is at, then we have a kind of, usually most people kind of skip right through to a kind of an arrival of Italian immigrants. And that is a massive oversimplification, because it skips an entire Northern Irish migration. It skips an entire Northern Irish migration that was encompassed in an idea of consolidated British morals and strategies through the Anglican Church. Hence, I would say, the reason why it has been underdocumented. Okay, so, and then we have, throughout that, we have conflict, but stability and an overall, collective view of what Australia was, and will be, more or less a consistent agreement. And then we have I'd say consistency all the way up. Then there's the post-war, where there was that's where kind of there was a migration of Italian people, fleeing and not just Italian, it's Italian, Eastern European, refugees from the Second World War. And there is the hallmark of those citizens, that were perhaps survivors, because always in warfare, there, especially in that war where there was a massive ideological, capture. They were enemies, but they were survivors also of a evil regime. So there was a type of xenophobic initiation that I believe through that gauntlet, those individuals did quite successfully integrate into the already conceived and already functioning Australian identity. Now, after that wave of migrants and refugees from World War II, then we arrive at what I believe is and should be declared as second wave British colonisation, and under a banner of socialism, of absolute socialism. So a national socialist British, and now what I would declare it as invasion, covert invasion of Australia. At the same time, we had you could assume that national socialist British fury, kind of emboldened and strengthened by success of World War II. My guess was that was putting pressure on the mainland population of Ireland economically. They were kind of taking too much air out of that region, they were commanding too much economic force, and that dispossessed the Irish. And then we had an Irish, not refugees directly, because I wouldn't call it a war. They had their internal war. And this is this late 50s, 60s, 70s, or really all the way up to the 80s and 90s. There was a consistent migration of Irish to Australia due to economic situations. And they were brought to Australia, and they were installed into the bedrock, they were installed into the socialist system that the second wave covert socialist British, invasion had demanded be established in Australia. So that second wave covert national socialist British invasion directly colonized over the top of the established former British citizens now, or British subjects now establishing Australians, and projected a European, London-centric socialism over the top of our system, and basically harvested the pioneering families. If they hadn't been able to see the winds of change coming and defend themselves, quite a lot did defend themselves, right? But maybe if you had a patriarch of your family, but even that started to break down, because that was the tool that was used, was this no-fault divorce, child support, disability pay, all of that, all of those socialist inputs were utilised to colonise Australia, but to no end. To colonise Australia to basically just to gain power. And what it has actually done, it is bankrupted Australia. And if you understand, it's like the part of the resource base that the local English, British citizens at this stage, United Kingdom citizens, were drawing upon in order to conceive these kind of these floating, supportive socialist, ideals, was already the resources extracted from Australia and invested. In the minds of Australians, we were investing in Britain, not in England. We're investing as a collective, in a long-term, appropriate planning strategy of mutual benefits, not a sloshy, trust fund for the lower classes of England to expand on, and this is like quite literally. It appears that the United Kingdom government utilised, funds that were invested from the entire Commonwealth into creating an army of Spice Girls and an army of Rolling Stones and Beatles to travel around the world and spread the good word about socialism. And then, in a weird twist of fate, the only reason the socialism was able to sustain itself in the United Kingdom was because it was an extractive, migration out. So it's like there was the story of this socialist cohort in United Kingdom is, well, they had to bring in people to provide the socialism, to provide the services that were demanded by the socialists. Then those individuals felt dispossessed by the people they brought in, so they migrated and basically hopscotched arbitrage around the Commonwealth, and most prominently in Australia. And Australia did not have a cohesive enough, social defence system against the exact individuals that we thought of as brethren, as recruits to but it was very different. See, it's like they benefited from the perceived connection, the perceived, premium connection to the United Kingdom and to Great Britain, and utilize that that archetype, that British, that person's got a British accent, they must be in charge, and then it's basically illegally invaded and installed a defective socialist system into every aspect of our society at the wrong stage. It's one thing for a highly evolved, it's gone through the complete process of feudalism and then, religious reformation and industrial revolution and printing revolution and Magna Carta and establishment, all those things. It's gone through that independently in that geographical region. It's one thing for that group, for that region, to experiment with a kind of, socialist ideal. It's a completely different thing to apply, to broadcast that ultra-metropolitan socialism to a gigantic, still being conceived region of pioneering, of a pioneering, continent that we're still not even really sure about the things like the climate and the soil conditions, we're not at a stage where we can accept or where we can provide that level of support. And that's in a completely optimistic telling of what socialism can provide. Even if you swallow fully the rhetoric that these socialists are projecting, and you say, well, it's this wonderful utopian socialist, creation, like this is wonderful. Look, everybody wins. It's like, okay, but even still, then it's like we can't afford that because we are pioneering, developers of a country that doesn't exist yet. And it's like the only reason that these cities exist as they do is because of this migration. But that's basically our life savings for the entire life of Australian history, for all the people that died, all the people on ships, all the hardworking shearers and gold miners, and the collective inhabitants, the collective population of Australia pre this socialist invasion was squandered into and driven through the United Kingdom to support this ridiculous group of floating bludgers. And the worst thing is, it's like they've installed this system completely unaware of what actually built the system. So it's like white hats. It's like socialism to the United Kingdom locally has been this exact. It's white ants. It is eating the core out of what the stable discipline and planning that built that place. Right, it's already spread out from there. It had to leave because it ate it too much. It couldn't, and then it's like, and now it's doing the same in Australia, and now it's doing the same into the future. Right, so it's like they utilize the sustainable kind of treasury to provide this thing, to provide, like, I don't know, like free arts courses and just an absolute explosion of, I basically call it fraud. They created an army of British socialists that became very good to the untrained eye at slipping under the radar and appearing as though they were the same as the former British people that in a lot of cases left to colonize Australia. So if you think there was a hierarchy of British, and you would call it aristocracy, but it doesn't necessarily have to only. It's like aristocracy and capable and well-disciplined conservative minds. They in their mind left the homeland in safe hands and proceeded to develop a new region. And then communication, between uprisings here and demand for federation and all these things, the ties were severed. And by that time there was no way to communicate. And this is empire. This exact thing happened in the Roman Empire and the Byzantine. It's the same exact thing, except it's happening right now, and it's like and we've got it all recorded. And it basically what it is, it's like you make an assumption. You go, well, who would be more British? Would it be the people that stayed at home and experimented with with new concepts of religion and social order, or would it be the people that were far afield and maintained the same mindset that our empire was built on? And this is the reason why you get to these arguments of colonisation and this condemnation of colonisation, is because that is the core principle that we're talking about. It's like, so we have a domestic, cohort of socialists brought up by the rising tide of the invading British socialists, brought up to legitimize some type of ridiculous claim that the first wave of colonization was absolutely horrendous, but this new wave has brought nothing but fucking glow sticks and fucking free love and a utopian socialist creation. But that is an outright lie. These socialists that have invaded our country from Britain, they have invaded, left because of their fucking filth and bullshit that they fucking distributed there. They abandoned their failing fucking system that they demanded. And unlike the Italians who came here, defeated and rose through our gauntlet of Australiana, unlike the Irish, who in some ways came here defeated and rose through our gauntlet of Australiana, this cohort of British socialists demanded to be brought to the pinnacle of our society purely because of the fact that they had an English accent. Not a British accent, not a historical, connection. Basically, they were trained by the BBC to speak correctly in one way or another, but not correctly, to speak with the right patterning, to be falsely identified as a higher class of individuals, and they overwhelmed our local population on that merit alone. That's it. They are bullshit artists. They are con men and women. And this kind of inherited servitude to an accent, because Australian history for the 150 years prior or the 200 years prior was shaped by a group of individuals that were Irish, Scottish, lower class English, all these things, and you brought someone with a toffee accent who actually was, sufficient in doing the required task, and that was Australia. That was how we functioned. We were just a consistent, top-down hierarchy with prisons, and not just prisons, like prisons, towns, farms, shires, communities, cities, all these things, basically, that followed this thing. You bring a well-spoken aristocrat from Britain to reform underneath the local population that had either deteriorated, in their words, under the hot Australian sun, or were attempting to be brought up to a higher class of living, because they were never bestowed with that in the first place. That is the truth of Australia. Not obscured, not under any type of false, kumbaya pretend party. That's how it worked. And so what did this socialist... Well, they got really good. They broadcast British propaganda to their own citizens and then spread them out across the Commonwealth to recolonise under basically a complete inversion of the pre-existing colonial ideal. The pre-existing colonial ideal was absolute, dedication and duty and conservative approach, religious scrutiny, like piety, frugality, responsible stewardship. And the reverse was shooting T-shirts out of a gun and like this was basically a P. Diddy fucking concert. But because it maintained the British presentation, which was trained into those lower class populations that had risen up, that had overwhelmed the local aristocracy, that had overwhelmed the local, diplomatic situation of the United Kingdom. And this is the real story. Second wave colonisation, isolated now in this West Australian, or sorry, not West Australian, in this Australian Labor Party, in this Anthony Albanese-led cohort of socialists. And I guess it's crunch time. It's like we now have a bumbling buffoon in this position, that traditionally, and I kid you not, all of this is required. The reason Anthony Albanese has been placed as the Prime Minister of Australia is to appease this second wave British invasion, in my words, of British socialists. He is the patsy to obscure the landscape so that in the hopes that we don't identify correctly this invading force, which are now, they're now castaways. Really, they're international castaways. They are a cohort of international castaways abandoned on this continent and claiming historic rights that they have neither earned or deserve. And that on close scrutiny, will be absolutely brought down to ashes. They are parasitic, pirate-like mobs of people that have completely, in one foul swoop, have stalled Australia's, responsible development, which in turn stalls our commitment and our, ability to assist and to work collectively with Britain. And they have also deferred our young people's, status quo to a destructive conceptual delusion. An atheistic, self-indulgent, self-deluding society of complete fucking scum. Collectively, if these, and at the same, so it's like, if we could go back to 1952 right now, and we can do this, and we speak to all the Italian migrants that came here. Now, it didn't matter if you were in support of Mussolini, right? If you were in support of Hitler, if you're a fascist, or whether you were hiding Jews under the fucking floorboards, right? If you arrived here in 1952 as an Italian, you were ran through, you and your family were ran through a gauntlet of Australiana, because the perceived, Australia at that time was a collection of British aristocrats that had lowered themselves to a already existing Australian version of a type of socialism. Australia had an effect where it brought people up from certain places, and it forced a lowering from people that may have gotten used to lofty heights of a class-based system in Europe, but that didn't fly. It didn't work here. So there was already kind of an equalness. Okay, there was discipline and there was respect, right? And there was all these things. But it looked very different here than it did in England. And so you can look at it two ways. You can look at it as xenophobia and as racism and as abuse, or you can look at it as camaraderie. You want to be Australian, right? You've got to run through the gauntlet because we have Irish, English, Welsh, Scottish, Australians here whose ancestor may have, suffered scurvy on a ship for stealing a loaf of bread and then, chopped down trees for things to build, whatever. It's like they've had a hard life, right? So we have to project this camaraderie onto you for you to run through the gauntlet and then become Australian. And that is the story of every single Italian migrant. Now, some of them, successfully navigated that. And there are, of course, others that kept, in opposition and perhaps even developed a type of, isolated ghetto-like Italian occupation of Australia. And that is both consistent with the prior example but still can be destructive. The Irish, the exact same. Because the new Irish were appropriately identified as new Irish. The new British were not. The new British colonised over the top of the old British. And they brought a destroyed version and perpetuated it to the top of our systems, to the extreme moment where we have a bumbling buffoon socialist, patsy masquerading as our prime minister. This cohort needs to be brought together and run through the gauntlet of Australia. This disciplinary action on this very large group needs to be broadcast back to England. That's it. There's no free lunch. There is no way. And how is that helped? Well, the United Kingdom had a strategy. The socialists of the United Kingdom, the aftermath of their union uprisings, they had two options. They either actually deliver what they claim they're going to deliver, or they expand and overwhelm other regions unprepared to defend against what we considered our own citizens. And we failed, and they committed what I would say is the most grave of sins. They invaded their own people in disguise. They covertly invaded the outskirts of their kingdom, of their realm, of their empire, and hocked it so that they could buy fucking drugs and glow sticks and funny hats and costumes and DJ decks, which brought the entire empire down. It destroyed the entire empire. So think of that force, that collectivization, that spirit of self-indulgence has been opposed, has been countered, has been parried by one single Australian individual whose family has been here for 101. One person. One person where the spirit and the honor and the duty and the all the things had not, in the eyes, in the rhetoric of the invading British forces, of the invading National Socialist British forces, Australia destroyed that in British people. Well, obviously, I'm living proof that that is not true. Australia didn't destroy our British identity. The British socialists attempted to genocide the British identity on all lands that it had spread to. In a far more disgusting, fierce display than anything documented. There were genocidal killings of Aboriginals, but they were happening by pioneering on the land. They weren't top-down decreed. We didn't spend, to put it in comparison, we didn't spend billions of dollars on digital media, presentations and propaganda that basically demanded of everyone that they go and spread their fucking selfish, self-indulgent fucking filth and consume like locusts, every single societal structure that had been hard built by all the forebears of a population that literally, feathered the pillows of England, that literally, defended the English from the bitter cold with their wool, and so on and so forth. It's like, this is where we are. I have no doubt that I have a collection of allied British, individuals and organizations at home, which I still call it, ready to step alongside me, and hold this net to collectively capture this group, this destructive, absolute abomination, and then run them through the Australia experience. Give them the Australia experience that in one foul swoop defends our hard fought for Australian identity, and in turn defends our hard fought for and hard won British identity. Once this is done, thoughts of an Indian man being referred to as British. Well, of course, an Indian man can be British. Of course, a dark-skinned man with a turban can be British. And in turn, of course, a white-skinned person with a British accent can be a convict dog. Of course, all of these things can be true. Of course, a British gentleman can talk of the land and wear a kubra and swat flies, and muster cattle. Of course. Otherwise, how would all of this be here? This cartoonized, this ultra concentrated and broadcast at an unprecedented level caricature of British history is done. It is over. It is finished. It is all fucking absolutely exposed at every single level. The illusion, this fairy tale that socialism will provide, it will defend, it will protect. It's like, well, is exactly what the people stealing Aboriginal children said. I was initiated into a system of colonial expansion by National Socialist British people, by the husband of my mother, and they were divorced before I was even fucking born. It doesn't work. It's a snowball of avoidance. It's a snowball of betrayal. Its momentum has only been enabled. Its enlargement has only been enabled by its, capacity to roll down a fucking hill and consume and incorporate everything it touches. And it is falsely broadcast and decreed its success, via its expansion and obfuscation of self-reflection. I spent 10 fucking years carefully working to the outside to throw myself off of this fucking thing. And then document it as it inevitably rolls down the hill and inevitably lands at the bottom of the hill, and explodes and is left in a pile of wet, soggy soil, wet, soggy mud. The classic archetype of this hippie socialist generation, Woodstock. Is it ironic that Woodstock, was the name of the Black Prince? Probably not. I don't know. Maybe this has all collectively been a defensive action and an experimental, or who knows? But the minute you see these, elderly British hippies, in the mud, in their own filth, with nowhere to run, nowhere to hide, demanding to be waited on, hand and foot, holding this archetype as the status quo and infecting it into local people like my mother. My mother was infected by this image of success. You know what I mean? I don't really blame her for not voluntarily, pushing that away. Why would she? Why would she voluntarily push away the idea of being waited on hand and foot? And that provided. She doesn't have the education level to actually identify this concept that she's, enslaving her children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren via her opulence. Imitative opulence. In my mind, she's a 10-year-old girl born in a tent playing with a dollhouse. And she's been chemically and societally, kept there to appease a National Socialist British invasion, and she's been utilised like fucking Trigonini or whatever it is, in this attempt of colonisation. She's been utilised as a token pioneering Scottish whatever class of Australian to display how successful this cohort of socialists has been at providing what is then underhandedly claiming that I, as her son, as her responsible son, would be unable to provide using my prehistoric, British ideals of frugality and of self-reliance, of all these things. It's a really well thought out expansion operation. It's a really well thought out invasion. You know, it encompasses so many things. But it provides nothing. You know, you go to Hobart, you go to Adelaide, you go to Sydney, you go to Melbourne, you go to Fremantle, Perth, wherever it is, right? You take this period, you know, from basically 1965, maybe earlier, I don't know, maybe 1950. You take away everything that was built after that, and it's a wonderfully beautiful place. You take away everything that was built before then, and it looks like an American fucking shopping mall. You know, it's like, let's not forget that this British invasion, this pop culture, was first inspired by the Americans. You know what I mean? Like the Beatles, the Rolling Stones, Led Zeppelin, Eric Clapton, all of them were inspired by Elvis Presley. By the interactions of white, lower class individuals and recently liberated Black American slaves. But it's like, what is the hopes of these people? Yeah, how did this individual capture so much area? And it's like, well, because there was a soul to it. There was something there, right? But this isn't continued on in this British expansion. You know, there's a British elitism that is not compatible with that archetype because it's not the United States. It is basically, it's like this individual was pushed and created as the focal point to keep all our eyes on America. As long as we all keep our eyes on America, then America can do what it does. No, it's the Americans projected and broadcast anti-British propaganda. They're still doing it. They've just gotten worse at it. They're not as good as they were. You know, it's global gentrification, an attempt of global gentrification of the British ideal, of the British, you know, archetype. And that's laid out quite clearly in front of me. It's like these socialists, these British national socialists, are brain dead fucking, consumers of American propaganda, of American anti-British propaganda, and have spread that out to all ends of our empire. They've been incepted with this concept that Elvis was king. Think about it. It's pretty ingenious. It's even more ingenious when you consider what it did. It's not that Elvis was some type of evil fucking, on his own merit. Elvis was a zoo animal. Elvis was like a circus elephant. He was a tiger in a cage. He shares all the same mood, behavioral, presentation, everything as Siegfried and Roy's tiger. And I guess before he had the chance to, attack his handlers, he died. But his ghost has lived on through this cohort of mimics, of impersonators. Whether they be directly impersonating or whether they be impersonating via the protocol of the Beatles or the Rolling Stones. What a brilliant display of subterfuge, of psychological warfare to convince the burgeoning, inheritors of the British Empire to imitate a caged fucking animal at a circus. Now, more than likely, anyone who actually came up with that is long gone and dead, and their descendants have, obscured their connection to that particular individual. But you have to appreciate something that has been successful to that level, even despite the fact that it has disaffected and, enslaved my family. You have to appreciate something that magnificently simple. So the first instance of capacity to broadcast audiovisual content was utilized to display a psychological warfare campaign presenting an American white man enslaved by a created record industry in order to convince the global population to wish for nothing more than to be the same. Oh my good God. And it's all held within the simple archetype of the king. Elvis was the king. No, Elvis was King Kong. That's it. Elvis was King Kong. In chains, under the fucking limelight, the red carpet, the circling thing, Empire State Building, King Kong. My king is King Charles III, rightful heir to the throne, connected to an unbroken and beautiful history of British culture, symbolically, taking on the weight of that empire and all its citizens via a magnificent symbolic coronation that took place a year ago or 2 years ago, whenever it was. And I will never in a million years let him be brought down to the level that individuals like Elvis Presley have been displayed. And I suppose it's time that we start, peeling the horrendous wallpaper off the beautiful architraves and the beautiful mosaics and whatever is still remaining underneath this veneer of Americana. And we start discovering our history that has been attempted to be destroyed by this simplified underdog, fairy tale of individuals like Elvis Presley. It's really simple. It's like, you like music, we'll go and play music. Yeah. If there's nowhere to play music, well, that's because our system is falling under an American projected fucking record industry bullshit brigade party. Music is most probably the worst possible way to achieve anything significant in the world. Although it is the best possible way to perhaps communicate something very deep to someone that is in your local vicinity. That's it. We need to slice up this reputation of Elvis. We need to identify that a tiger or a lion in a cage is a beautiful thing, but it pales in comparison to that representation, free and beautifully presented in its natural habitat of wherever it is. Not jumping through a hoop, but just laying in the sun, whatever it is. These symbols, these icons, these idols. Sometimes it's convenient when they directly tell you things. These idols are false in every interpretation, every sense of the word. They are false idols that have been projected by a failing, floundering American empire. And we really need to start addressing how horrifically affected we have been by these simple magic tricks. It's not a magic trick to organize and systematize and develop sustainably and securely and appropriately, responsibly, all those really big words that a lot of people have thought they've left behind as soon as the last, time they had to confront the principal or the headmistress. Oh, that's all gone now. I can just be Elvis. It's like we need to start telling this. Elvis was a dancing bear. Elvis, probably a wonderful person, wonderful man, a beautiful singer, all these things, a sex, all these things, he would have been that wherever he was. He would have been that if instead of being, a dancing bear at Las Vegas, if in his 60s he pulled his guitar out and plucked it a little bit and did a tune, on his fourth marriage, and he became, an accountant. He's still the same. That's the same thing. That's the sleight of hand. They want you to believe. They draw you in. Look at Elvis. Look at him. You want to throw away all of your British Empire ambitions and history and become American like us. It's so good in America. It's so good in America. It is wonderful here. Look at Elvis. Look at him dance. We go to the moon. Ra-da-da-da-da-da-da. That's all it is. It's thousands and thousands and thousands and thousands of years old, but it has been condensed and fucking hyper-focused in the largest military industrial broadcasting projection ever fucking conceived. On the first time that was an option. This is continuously a theme as well. It's like, oh, I've invented a way to capture images and permanently display. Shall we use them to project a dancing bear, human slave, white archetype of fucking gentrification around the world and then pretend that we walked on the moon? I can't see why not. I can't see why not. You know, it's at some point we are going to have a machine that can scan the human mind exactly the same as they have in airports that scan. We've already accepted this. You go through a machine at the airport that scans to see if you have a knife, okay? Right? Well, we're going to create a machine that you go through the airport, it scans you, and it tells us whether you have an empirical fucking Americana fucking self-destructive national socialist fucking delusion of the lowest common denominator fucking super society in which a dancing bear is the pinnacle of fucking human presentation. Ah, you've been inflicted, right? And I'm guessing because, you know, if I want to follow the trend of American propaganda in recent events, I'm guessing that would appear under a microscope, under this electromagnetic field, that particular affliction, right? This Americana infliction, this Elvis envy, right, would more than likely float around in the mind, and it looks something like that, okay? And it attaches to your cerebral cortex in a process of indoctrination via the television, okay? The television, it tells you to be Elvis. It restricts your observation that Elvis is a dancing bear, and it occupies your mind until you rattle around and destroy all of your beautiful empire, whether it be the British Empire, whether it be the Russian Empire, whether it be the French Empire or the Roman Empire. Whatever it is their little mermaid effect. And it is terminal. Except for now, with my magical feather. That's right. Is a magical feather any more strange than a fucking magical space helmet that allows you to walk on the moon? Or a magical fucking jumpsuit that allows you to to become the king of rock and roll? Not really. Elvis actually literally wrote things about him being a superhero. His entire fucking presentation was based on a superhero comic. This isn't much different. So with this magical feather, I can cure you of this spike protein, this Americana spike protein ball that is attached in your cerebral cortex. It prevents you from being a wonderful and successful, a wonderfully incorporated, a wonderfully a wonderful presentation of our beautifully, subtle and responsible British Empire. It just washes it away. You know what I mean? It's like, how many mayors, premiers, governors, commissioners, CEOs, all these, how many of them, it's like, it's like Elvis. I want to be Elvis, right? Can't be Elvis, so I'm going to be the police commissioner. Commish. Dare I say it, I want to be Elvis. It can't be Elvis. I'm going to be the first American Pope. All due respect, Leo, but, you know, I want to be Elvis. I want to be Elvis. Oh, no, I'll be this. Right? Perpetual unsatisfaction, as Mick Jagger would have said. I can get no satisfaction. You know, as soon as you're told that, oh, you can't get no satisfaction. Okay, well, yeah, that's the British condition. Oh, we've all wonderfully carried this British condition of can't get no satisfaction, you know, and that drives us perpetually to get our satisfaction by developing a wonderful society that provides and draws people in with traditions and wonderful things and everything. And the way that we do that is we don't allow a dancing fucking bear white slave man from the colonies to be projected to the pinnacle of society in an attempt to overthrow our true king, Jesus Christ. You know what I mean? It's like, that's what that not satisfaction is supposed to be driven towards. It is supposed to be driven towards betterment for everyone, not betterment for yourself. You know, you need to understand that Jesus is a far better Elvis than Elvis is or was. Is that how you wanted me to say it? Oh, yeah, I do. He's still alive. He's in the lounge room. I'm looking at him right now. How else would I have the gall to fucking speak of such things unless Elvis Presley himself was sitting in my lounge room and demanding that I say it? These individuals, Sigmund Freud, Edward Bernays, you know, the PR and marketing sociopaths of our past, they were incredibly brilliant minds utilizing incredibly powerful tools and were completely devoid of any optical instruments to project the potential catastrophic results of their fucking meanderings, of their experiments. And so I guess that they are to be forgiven. You know, if you're born as an American, a loyal, you know, patriotic American, and you've been convinced by your parents, grandparents, and media and everyone around you that your sole purpose is to destroy the British Empire, then, you know, I guess these things were undertaken in that spirit, but that spirit leads to nothing else but the perpetuation of destruction. It's constant destruction. It's constantly destroying a clearly visible structure of societal developed civilization. It's like in one foul swoop, and this isn't to claim that we are, you know, we're holier than thou, that we didn't do things, that we didn't present animals in cages, and we did all of that stuff. And perhaps there's an argument that this process, and this is usually the case, has not been a waste of time. It's like, well, why? We needed to go through this to see Elvis as a dancing bear. I think to see a white man as a dancing bear, as a slave. You know, perhaps that was the blind spot of the British ideal. It's like we were unable to see ourselves in the condition that we applied onto others. And so in a subconscious union of colonial, magic and mystery. We broadcast and ran an experiment of what it would look like if if every white man across the world wanted nothing more, strived with all their might to reach that pinnacle of, of a sideshow, of an incarcerated circus animal, in the hopes that maybe we could then see that no matter what point we are at in society, no matter what type of society we're trying to create, it's like we are all enslaved. If you think of this as a shell game, it's like, who's Elvis now? Who's the caged animal? Is it me? Is it Trump? Is it the king? Is it Katy Perry? Is it Russell Brand? Is it Anthony Albanese? Who's the caged fucking bear? Who's performing for the crowd? And it's like we all are. But who is deciding what direction we go in? There's a hope. I think it's like Elvis is perpetually kept. He was demanded and asked to do one thing very well. And then there's a hope. There's a kind of false, there's a heuristic, malfunction in humanity that we think it's if someone does one thing incredibly well, that they will, of course, do all the other things that we desperately need very well. This is the thought that an individual like Elvis would be, Elvis should have been president. He should have been king of the fucking world. And I've met many people that literally, they believe this to the highest level. And it's like, no, Elvis was a dancing bear. If Elvis was the king of the world, he would make everyone a dancing bear. And according to American, folklore, Elvis was the king of the world. Every single pop star, recording artists, all of them, they're all reaching for that. That will never happen again. It can't. It was a momentary, experience that was only possible through that development process of, he drove through the evolution of recording, didn't really exist, of broadcasting, of media, of everything, of communication, high level distribution of things like records. Then again the television era where he was then regurgitated, and now the internet era where he's regurgitated, and now inevitably the artificial intelligence where he's regurgitated. It's like, but we're here right now. And it's not an attempt for me to bring down the reputation of Elvis. I just say that it's like, I think Elvis has had enough promotion, considering he is the human equivalent of Tilikum. Tilikum being the orca that attacked people. It's like, this is what we have. I would actually argue that we have another figure in our social culture that fills this same void. There's a resetting phenomenon that happens through Christianity, because Christ is always maintained as the sole highest level martyr, then I guess what is hoped is that no one will fall into the trap that is something that should be reached for, because that would lead us, but I would argue as well, it counterintuitively also sets that bar for everyone. It makes the target higher. It has to be larger. I've fallen into this, undoubtedly fallen into this. But then there seems to be a fork in the road. It's like you go that path. You idealistically, try and claim your messiah status, or you step off the treadmill, or that you step off the escalator, and you start picking up pieces of rubbish on the floor. You know what I mean? You start cleaning graffiti off a wall. These systems that were like, it is all repair. We have been under 80 years of constant attack. Okay, it's like, in some ways, it's like, it would be so much easier in the days, if we go back to the days of cannon fire, where it's like, oh, there's a hole in the wall of the fucking Fremantle. You can't deny that. There's a fucking hole in the wall. You just heard a big bang, and there's a French ship on the horizon. Oh, that's, terrible, terrifying, all these things, but still invigorating and undeniable. There's a fucking hole in the wall. There's a French flag hanging over that fucking back of that ship. You know what I mean? That's clarity that should be fondly, recalled, because it's like, now we have a collection of 80 years of subversive attacks, of invasions, of assaults, of inception of destructive concepts, of all these things. It's like, you have to instill yourself with the vision, with the capacity to actually even see. And human society, polite society, now entirely revolves on the obfuscation of observation of those attacks and the damage that they have caused. It is mass denial. This becomes the position of office. The position our Prime Minister and all the public servants hold is in the dedication to the obfuscation of optical fucking, realization of a series of attacks that have left us permanently disabled, that have left us permanently in a quicksand of historical fucking experimentation that inevitably is becoming so large that, unlike, well, I've kept the fact that somebody's poisoned the water, right? One instance. We now have a collection of instances that are so large that realization of the scale of the gigantic proportion of the actual situation is a situation of its own. I kind of think this is our obsession with the extraterrestrial. It's like, that would be a convenient scapegoat story to explain away this, and to bring it into something where no one is forced to take responsibility. It was aliens. We've been under attack by aliens for 100 years. When in reality, we've been experimenting with covert, assault and subterfuge and inception for 100 years. And part of this is like, if you are heading a covert operation of sabotage or whatever, it's like you don't leave any evidence. You don't, and this is it. It's like what we are dealing with. We are surrounded by landmines that have effects, like flow-on effects, that go through generations and decimate all for no particular reason. Like, if you think it's like a landmine, the concept of a landmine is like, it's a thing that's built to stop tanks getting in, invasion on a territory, and then it's like 20 years later, a child walking to school gets blown up by a landmine. Horrific, right? Because it's collateral damage with not intended target, right? It's absolutely decimates the thing. It has no soul. It has no conscience. It is an inanimate, creation of man that sits in wait to destroy an entire family and community in the blink of an eye. Well, this is what we have in a thousand other ways as well. We have really large examples like Elvis. Okay, there's no way. Like, you can go into a remote small village in Ireland, in a back alley tavern somewhere, and sit down, and you will see your very own version of Elvis Presley. Live and unedited, right there and then, and he will have had a life that, in my guess, would rival that of any projected pinnacle display of the entertainment industry, if you took the time to listen to it. Right? So that's a problem, because it dilutes the power of that individual. If we think Elvis was a powerful, he was brought down to share the thing with us, and we thought, see, there could be a harmless thing as well. It's like, well, we thought he was so powerful that we spread him out so that he would spread. It's like, yes, it's a necessary thing, but it's like that individual, they are all like that. Every now and then, not all of them. Some of them think they're like, anyway. But that's it is diluted because we have kept our attention on that. And I think it's like Jesus fills the same exact role. For all the good that Jesus has done, I'd say that Jesus has done the exact amount of bad, because, how long have we been saying, who do you think you are, Jesus? You know what I mean? We're saying it to the president right now. Who do you think you are, Jesus Christ? And it's like, if you strip that away, you get to, what is it? It's like, why don't you pick that piece of rubbish up off the floor? Who do you think you are, Mother Teresa, Jesus Christ? Why don't you just leave it there? Like, it's a reason to do nothing. It's a permission slip of apathy. And it was more than likely bad enough when it was just Jesus. That's not like, Jesus didn't come here to do those types of things. He can't control how humans distribute his words and, concentrate his church, whatever, all those things. That's a collateral effect. That's the landmine effect of Jesus Christ. It doesn't mean that Jesus was a landmine. It doesn't mean that was his intention. It doesn't mean anything. It doesn't mean that Christians are collectively sabotaging the world. None of those things. It is just a phenomenon that happens throughout humanity's interaction And we have to remember that humankind, right? All biological creatures, all living, breathing creatures have an imperative for efficiency, which means if we're given an option to do nothing, we will do nothing. You know, the permission slip of Adam. I've come and I've died for all of your sins. Is walking past a piece of rubbish and not picking it up, putting it in the bin, is that a sin? Yes. Don't worry, I've got you. Nah, don't worry about picking it up. I'm Jesus. I died for your sins. You don't have to pick up that bit of rubbish. It's like, where does it stop? We have an imperative as a biological fucking creature. You know, in the constant battle of entropy, we have a imperative to be efficient. You know, considering rubbish, the idea of rubbish did not exist. It is a recent creation. Rubbish that we're trying to very quickly, you know, destroy. It's like, this is made out of paper and it will biodegrade. It's like, is it any longer rubbish? Is it? This is going to be a cultural moment that we need to get. You know, we're one step away from maybe, you know, being able to install a little seed in there of an Australian native plant, and then when you throw it out of your window, it's no longer rubbish, and then we're back to full circle. This is where we've spent our entire lives. You throw a banana peel out or a fucking apple core or whatever, and it grows. You know. But still, there is such a thing as rubbish, and walking past it is a sin. And I'd say, although Jesus does cover all sins, maybe the church can remind us that, you know, those sins should be only utilized, that protection from sin should maybe be concentrated to the complicated nature of complexity. So it's, you know, in these strange either or 6-7 situations where there may be sin or may not be, then you don't need to stress as much because Jesus has got you covered. But it's like, societally, if you walk past the piece of rubbish, maybe you should be, you know, given a little bit of guilt. You know, it's experimentation. It's like, well, what really does Jesus cover? Well, he covers everything, you know. But I'd say that if you are tempting God, you know, if you're testing God's patience rather than utilizing his son's, you know, gift responsibly, it's like, what spirit are you doing it in? You know, can we get closer? It's like, well, obviously Jesus didn't embrace the spirit of avoidance, did he? The spirit of avoidance was not really in Jesus's handbook. I could avoid this, but I won't, right? Now, there is a very true story that if you do that in certain ways, you may get killed. You know what I mean? So to walk in the spirit of Jesus is not to be covered by his protection, to walk past the smallest, most easily accessible moment to redeem your environment or to, you know, to improve your environment via the spirit of avoidance. You know, and that's really where we are. We are in the empire of avoidance. Every single day, this is the majority of most people's lives, is avoidance. There is a thing. There is a very significant, you know, malfunction or problem or conflict or whatever, and we are collectively all avoiding that every single manifestation of whatever there could be. We are in avoidance. And that's my argument, is that creates a pattern on the world. Whenever you are given an option, you think, if you are given the option to think, I am walking from here to there and there is a piece of rubbish there, and that would be a detour from my path. So I am forgiven by Jesus to not pick up the rubbish. And my argument would be, every moment you are given an option to intervene positively in your environment and you decide not to, you are turning. You are not going straight. You are turning. You are making a turn, whether it be a left turn or a right turn. It doesn't matter, but it's like you are making a turn. Based on 360 degrees, it's like you make a consistent amount of those turns of avoidance and you end up right back where you were. You circle back on yourself and you never go anywhere. If you assume that on your path there will be instances or chances, opportunities to intervene positively in your environment on the left and on the right, you can walk along, and you should be encouraged to, as you go, little things, solve little things on your journey as you go, and then that will keep you in a straight line. Avoidance is constantly a turn away from your path. And this, I think, this is another way to look at, rather than to think of Jesus as this figure, you think of Jesus as the model. And then, so what was Jesus most prominently displaying? I would say the spirit of non-avoidance. And that's it. So it's like, if you wish to be Christian, you should participate in this kind of cleaning up. That's it. Avoidance is a sin, right? And it's a sin. It's like, yes, it's forgiven, but it isn't. It's forgiven, but it's like, it's not particularly punished unless you really, really consider that ending up circling back and ending up in the same place is punishment, which I do. Because that is exactly what it will do. It will consistently end you back there. Of avoidance. Now, the problem really is that when you are participating in avoidance or mass avoidance, and you are coming up against an opponent who is not, they will blow you out of the water, because they will zoom up with Google Maps and they will watch you avoid the 10 pieces of rubbish and then walk around in circles, and then they will mock you on that. They will say, well, why should we listen to anyone that is doing that? It's not saying we should imprison them or condemn them or, ostracize them. It's saying, why should we listen to anybody who is doing that? The more of you that we can connect, this is an individual who's doing this. This is another individual who's doing this. This is another individual who's doing this. This is another individual who's doing this. And the one thing that they are collectively doing together, that they are collectively not avoiding, is the accusation onto me. I'm not chasing them down to if an argument or a discussion point comes along in my way and they happen to be carrying that, then I try and deal with it, and they avoid it. My guess is that is the pattern of their life, and that they are floating on an ocean of avoidance, that is projected from the highest of, perceived highest authority levels of our government. It is a pseudo religion. My argument is like, if we all come from, whether you're the original pioneering class, Christian cohort of Australians, whether you're the Italian cohort that arrived here after the devastation of World War II and Christian or Catholic, whatever it is, or whether you're this new, it's like they're avoiding Christianity. That's it. We've been sold this. It's religion's a choice. You can choose whatever. It's like, okay, right. What have you done with all of that choice? I've just kept avoiding. Whenever Christianity arrives, I avoid it. So, yeah. And what has this led you to? What have you brought forth by this avoidance? And that's an inversion. It's like you can't bring anything forth from avoidance. That's the whole point. A Christian society was a society that was less tolerant to avoidance. That's kind of it. It doesn't let excuses rule. It doesn't allow that slither of light for you to escape your responsibilities. And I guess this is almost 2 hours long. This is long. I'm going to round this off by saying that if you're a family unit and an individual in your family, finds themselves disabled, well, that has been put on your path for a reason. Collectively, if you hold that responsibility as a family, then you can weather that storm. If we live in a society that doesn't reward avoidance, then we can do that. And this puts pressure on all individuals. Like the disabled person, they are not allowed to avoid because they are disabled. They are helped, they are provided care and all these things. But they are not stripped of their humanity by being provided everything. And then every person in court. It's like these systems of care have morphed and have turned into something that is far worse. If you listen to my explanation, that it is my belief that the diagnosis, the mental condition that was given to my mother was not a mental condition, it was mental conditioning. She was conditioned to display the symptomology of a decreed disorder in order to project this pseudo-religious cult out. And that has done nothing but destroy the solid foundations that my paternal line had consistently presented in Australia. She was built to be an agent of chaos, and she was paid to be an agent of chaos, and she has been defended by the highest levels of authority in this state to be an agent of chaos, to obscure the realization that we have indeed been invaded by a treasonous cohort of British National Socialists for the last 60 years, 70 years. And this argument will be brought to light before the end of my days. It will be resolved in the highest courts. There will not be a generation of Australians, children, that will be subjected to the same ridiculous bullshit that I was subjected to and my brother was subjected to. In the worst case recently, a little birdie told me that a 18-year-old, 19-year-old, whatever it is, 20-year-old woman was remunerated $300 for taking an autistic child to a movie. 300 Australian dollars. My mother has been paid for the last 40 years a pension which overshadows the amount of property she received by this, fleeting marriage situation with my father. It overshadows that by a monstrous amount. The other benefits overshadow it. All of these things factored in. But for 40 years, I have not received 1 cent for providing some of the most prominent care in her life. And in fact, it's quite the opposite. She has been the most destructive element in my life by design. That is what she is paid for. So throughout all of these things, Australia, the United Kingdom, Scotland, the Commonwealth, the British Empire, it's like throughout all of this, I'm going to find out where I'm supposed to be. I'm going to get there, and I'm going to fucking put an end to this ridiculous fucking concept. This caricature of disability, especially of mental disability, because it's multi levels. It's like building a fucking temple on the ruins of another temple on the ruins of another. It's like there is no actual certainty on any level. And this is where you get to. And it's like, and I have the capacity to speak about it and to bring it to everyone's awareness, and nothing is done. Because it's like, whereas from my perspective, it's always just me, a father trying to find terra firma in order to build, and restore his family. But on the opposite, I'm opposing constantly billion-dollar pharmaceutical industries, billion-dollar, psychiatric professions, trillion-dollar fucking judiciary systems, trillion-dollar fucking, nation states and states, trillion-dollar resource extraction, all of these things. It's like, well, hang on a second. This is a serious malfunction. It is so seriously invading and trespassing on the rights, clearly outlined in Magna Carta. And not one individual of European descent has come to this land, Australia, in any other structure than that system through Westminster established by Magna Carta. There's no one. You cannot, unless you're an Aboriginal, and then you're in a different camp completely. It's like how dare we claim, how dare we be speaking about anything to do with a modern approach of care of Aboriginal, but any of these things, although, I'm probably in agreement with it. But if it resembles anything like what I was put through, then that is far worse. It's like this system was designed to restrict the most dedicated, disciplined, educated, responsible voice in my entire upbringing was beaten into submission, and the most disruptive, chaotic, abusive individual was elevated and paid to present her most destructive fucking potential that she could possibly muster, which is also abuse. It's like doing that, enabling someone to that level is abuse onto her, especially someone who has been, retarded and disrupted from appropriately developing as an integrated human being. Why? Because she was remunerated, she was protected by this system. It's like it is not as simple as what it is. And because my basic claim is that the intention of this is just a covert invasion by British National Socialists, there is no rhyme or reason to it. That's it. That's what it was designed for. That's why. It's why it's not to the pinnacle of the conversation right now. It's like, how? Hang on a second. How many of these cases are there? It's like, it's direct fucking colonization. It's actually, like, according to our constitutional monarchy, it's direct treason. And to obscure it is treason. Yeah, there's only one way through this, and it's to actually see the situation. We need to relearn how to insulate our societies from perpetuating this avoidant status quo. Through gestures of soft power or through higher levels of role models, whatever it is. It's like that is paramount. It's like we have inverted our system. We are creating zombie spokespeople for global industrial chains of either profession or chemical. And it is destroying the hard fought for foundation of an appropriate society. It's like, and that's if you shift it and you go, well, that's exactly what the Opium Wars were. It's like this is, of course, this is what's happening. And it's all a game of optics. It's like, I can't take my elderly mother to court. That's obvious. The optics of that are ridiculous. She's in a lot of cases, that's the whole point. That's how this has been allowed to get to this ridiculous level. It doesn't belong there. It's like, I should be able to be given the name and details of the psychiatrist that initiated my mother into this Lamborghini driving fucking lunatic, right? And I should be able to fucking kill him. Or bring him to justice, whatever that is. But it's like this is something I was born into and trapped within. And because it isn't clearly identified, see, the Catholic Church, in comparison, participated in this stolen generation, as did, I think, the British state, or the Commonwealth state, the Australian federal government, and the state governments. So we did that. We've identified that. We took Aboriginal children, we cared for them in this way. It has been, it has had a re-reflection of the phenomenon, and it has been dismissed as a disgusting protocol, but then is now being, we're now seeing the flip side of that in these violent acts and this child abuse thing and the drug and alcohol substance abuse kind of situations that are displaying themselves in the communities. So what hasn't been, because it has not been elevated to religious status, despite the fact that it is exactly a religious ideology, is the same thing to do with this psychiatric industry. That and hey, it needs to be. And the funniest thing is of all, it's like it seems to be. It has religious fervor about anti-religiousness. It's like I was indoctrinated into an anti-religious cult that persecutes religion in ways that religion hasn't persecuted anyone in hundreds of years. It has rekindled, reignited that religious fury, displayed in things like like the Cathars, but projected it at the religious, and the worst thing is like if you were born in a Catholic community or a Catholic family or whatever, it's like, and you're insulated by that thing, it's like you don't know about this because they're not going after you. They're not going after the religious people in their communities. They're going after the emergence of religion within their own fold, which is now everyone. These houses of worship, public hospitals, are projecting atheistic genocide. So a genocide in the worship of a godless fucking scientism. And they are actively attempting to eradicate any moment of spiritual interaction. Any like that, and that's, that could you uncover anything more horrific when you understand that all of our systems of civilization have in my culture have all been refined through spirituality, specifically Christianity, whether it be Catholic or whether it be Protestant. It's like that is the rule. This is an atheist, scientist, socialist cult that is participating in real time in a pagan human sacrifice right here, right around us. That is indoctrinating children into a godless fucking cult that worships false fucking idols of absolute, slovenly self-indulgence. Crazy.